Today on this Warhammer 40k video, we're going to be going over specifically the chapter approved mission deck and talking more about the challenger cards within this deck. So if you're somebody who is excited about the new chapter approved mission deck and you want to understand how these cards will fundamentally change how you play the game moving forward, you're going to want to stick around because I'm going to be going over my thoughts after a handful of practice games with these new rules. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I got the challenger cards in front of me here, and overall, I gotta say, I think it is mostly a W for Games Workshop with these challenger cards. I think it is the best mechanic so far that they have implemented to create more or less some less feels bad moments, right? We have all been there in Warhammer games where your opponent, the first two turns, he just rips 20 points on secondary, and you draw no prisoners, mark for death turn one, and then you get like bring it down and something else, and you're like, man, I'm doing everything correct, but I am just getting completely screwed on secondaries. And of course, Games Workshop knows it's somewhat of feels bad in the game right now, and they're more or less trying to correct that. And they tried to do it last season or last year in Pariah with the secret mission mechanic, which they did. I think it was an interesting mechanic, and they had to tweak it a little bit. And then from that tweak, you never really saw it in the game ever again. And so they've taken it out, and they've implemented challenger cards as a catch-up mechanic, which I think overall it's cool. I think just like secret missions, I think it does need to be tweaked a little bit. But I think the idea around it and how it's implemented, I think is really cool. So overall, looking at this deck, the first thing that I want to talk about is the cards themselves. Okay, so if you didn't already know, there are 9 challenger cards, all right? And as it stands right now, recording this video, each player is going to share the same challenger deck. Now, one of these cards can only be drawn if somebody is trailing by 6 victory points. Now, that is including your primary and your secondary total. It is not one or the other. So at the end of each battle round, starting at battle round 2, if you're trailing by 6 points, that player gets a challenger card. Now, that card is not drawn at the start of the battle round. It is at the start of the player's turn as it stands right now. And again, it is 6 victory points trailing behind. All right. Now, each challenger card, as you know as well, you get one stratagem that you can use, and then you get one like extra mission you can do for 3 victory points. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these cards and read them. I know there's tons of people that have already done that. That's not why you're here. I'm more or less trying to give you my thoughts of how I think it's going to fundamentally change how you play the game. Because to be honest, with these cards now, we are kind of playing a little extra mini game, if you will, I guess, to handle these cards. So with the mission cards themselves, I would say about 5 of the 9 missions are easy to score. So like if we look at these first 2, if you just have one unit 15 inches away from an enemy, you just score 3 victory points. Okay, so some of these are very, very easy to score, and some of them are not. Okay, so if we look at, for example, this one, end of your turn, 1 or more units from your army are within your opponent's deployment zone. All right, so getting into your opponent's DZ rounds 2 and 3, relatively difficult for a lot of armies. Like unless you're playing like a very fast melee rush list or something like that, this is not one of the easier ones to score. All right, so I would say there's probably like a 50-50 chance you have opponent draw a challenger card and they get an easy one versus they get one that's like relatively more difficult. All right. Now, there of course are some granularities with the strats themselves. I think overall most of the strats are relatively strong. There are a couple duds in there as well. I'd say probably 6 of the 9 are just absolutely solid. 2 or 3 of them in particular are just like crazy, crazy good. And you do have to be aware of these. I think it's a very good thing if you're a competitive 40K player. I think it gives you a lot of value of going through each one of these challenger cards and just more or less having it in the back of your head of like, hey, these are things that I need to be aware of, because Drawing one of these cards, unfortunately, it could fundamentally change a game. Now, I think people are blowing it out of proportion a little bit in terms of, it's just going to screw up the game like every single game. I think it's definitely going to be more of a niche case. But overall, I think it is a very good idea. But I do still think it needs some tweaks. And the first thing I want to talk about in terms of it fundamentally changing the game is for the player going first. All right. So I played a game which I'm going to highlight against Tau later this week. And I went first in this game. And and we were playing with the new challenger cards, and I was approaching the game as I normally would, or as I would with if I was playing like a pariah mission or something like that. And the biggest like aha moment for me going first is usually when you're going first, one of the biggest advantages is that obviously you get to move your units first, you get to stage, and you have easier access going into turn 2 to potentially deny your opponent's secondary, right? So because you're going to be naturally probably closer to their natural expansion. If you're not familiar with the natural expansion term, it's referring to the objective that is closest to your enemy's deployment zone, not yours, okay? It's like a StarCraft term, more or less. But basically, the objective that is closest to your enemy's deployment zone that's very easy for them to hold, okay? So when you're going first, it's usually easier going into round 2 to deny that primary. Unfortunately, with these challenger cards in play, there's more to think about because of the fact that if you go and deny their primary, you're essentially automatically putting yourself down or putting them down 5 victory points. And in turn, it makes it easier for them to be able to draw a challenger card going into battle round 3. Okay. So when you really think about it in a very granular sense, if you send out some striking scorpions or whatever it may be, some JPI to go mess up your opponent's natural expansion turn 2 and just deny some primary, you're essentially only netting 2 victory points instead of 5 by doing that, because you're going to sacrifice a unit, you're going to deny the primary, but then you're going to give your opponent a free challenger card. And they're going to have the option whether they want the super good ability if they draw it, or they just potentially get the 3 victory points. All right. So that's kind of my first, I think, minor gripe with the challenger cards that I'm not super in love with is you don't really get as much value for denying primary potentially in the early game. It does kind of encourage this. I don't want to mention the word like sandbagging, but it does feel kind of a little like Turtle Warhammer the first like couple rounds, because you're really trying to be cognizant of not giving your opponent a challenger card in the early game. I think overall, based on the games that I've played thus far, I don't think that is a good idea. And that is the first standout, I think, problem that I don't like with the challenger cards is it does, I feel like, have a little bit of a disadvantage for the person going first, because not only do they not necessarily want to deny primary in the early game, but also the person going second has full knowledge of where they're at in the victory point total, so they can choose whether they want to go down on points or stay the same. So to put this, articulate this a little bit better, let's say you're going first, okay, and you draw Area Denial and Secure No Man's Land. And normally you're like, oh man, dude, love that, super excited. I'm going to put like my infiltrating unit on the center objective. I'm going to get Area Denial for 5 points. I'm going to put my normal unit that I put on the natural expansion, and boom, I got my 10 secondary points, okay? Then you pass it over to your opponent, okay? Your opponent, let's say they get Cleanse and they get a Tempting Target, all right? So Cleanse, they have an option now because you're essentially up by 10 victory points. So now what your opponent can do is they can be like, well, I could go over here and get my 8 victory points or my 10 victory points as well, because I could easily get Cleanse and a Tempting Target that first turn, or they could have the option to just not do a tempting target and not have to like sacrifice an extra unit, right? And they could just cleanse on one objective. So they're conveniently down 6 victory points, and then they're able to draw a challenger card in that next turn to score potentially more points, and then on top of their secondary. So that is my second gripe with challenger cards as far as negatives, is the fact that my personal opinion, I think the person going second is at an even more of an advantage as it stands right now, just because they have full information of where the points totals are going into battle round 2. So something to be wary of there. The third probably minor gripe with challenger cards that I have is, and how I think it's fundamentally just gonna how you play the game is, I mean, they can literally just change the game. I mean, you could spend, this is a very, very niche case, and it is what it is, but I mean, you could potentially spend your whole turn trying to figure out, okay, like I'm gonna do this move blocking and try to like screen this out there, and then your opponent ends up being down 6 victory points. They draw the challenger card of just moving through walls, and you're like, cool. Like, I spent all this time like trying to move this stuff around, and now you're just like going through my guys. So I think in general with challenger cards as it stands right now, what I've found is you really do want to prevent them from drawing a challenger card at least in round 2. And potentially round 3 as well, and then really trying to then push hard in turns 4 and 5. Now, this isn't like a standard rule by any means, but when we're talking about, you know, how it's fundamentally going to change Warhammer as it stands right now, I think you just need to be cognizant of what these can do and what it really means in terms of gameplay. I think as far as doing primary denial in turns 2 and 3, you don't get as much value out of it right now for the person going first, which I think is kind of unfortunate, because that was one of the bigger advantages of going first. And if you've been playing Warhammer the past year, you know, if you didn't already know, going second in this game is still pretty good. It's still pretty good. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are certain armies that always love going first, but for the most part, quite a few of these missions, they really do like the person going second. So there is that. I will say overall some positives, though. I really do like the mechanic. I will say it does make you think more, which, you know, some players may like that, some players may not. I think on the competitive level, there's definitely a lot more to think about in those earlier rounds. Like if I give you the example that I gave earlier, as far as with the drawing secure and area denial, like in that scenario, I would probably look just to get baby area denial and not intentionally not score one of those cards. So I'm only up 5 points and not up 10, to not give my opponent the control of whether they want to get a challenger card or not. I think that's one thing to be very cognizant of if you're the player going first as it stands right now, with the new chapter approved mission deck. So the other positive thing with the challenger cards, I mean, it's just a different dynamic with the game. It is a shakeup. I think it's fun. You know, some people might look at it like, hey, you know, change is good. And you know, not everything is bad, but I will say that I think the challenger cards, they need a little bit of a tweak. It's tough to say whether it would be better, and I'm open in the comments below. Feel free to give me your thoughts and opinions. I mean, it's kind of an open forum here, but I'm just giving you my thoughts and overall impressions and how I think it's going to change our gameplay going into the next year. But with these challenger cards, I think I would like to see if they bumped it up to like 9 victory points or 10 or whatever, bumping that up, or it's something where, you know, you can only draw 1 challenger card a game, or you can draw 2 challenger cards a game. I think the ability, I just don't like the idea of, you know, I'm going first and I have to slow down my game plan because of these challenger cards. I don't know if that is the best mechanic personally, and I'll be honest, I'm not super in love with it right now, but it is still early. You know, I could like it more as I play more games, but those are at least my initial findings. I mean, I will say when you're going second, it feels great. But going first is definitely, it has definitely been a little bit more complicated. So overall, those are my initial thoughts on the Challenger cards, how I think it's going to fundamentally change how we play Warhammer going forward. And I think more or less it's just more kind of slower gameplay. I think thinking, especially if you're going first, really trying to think about what your go turn is going to be to really push that differential. And not, there's no more kind of like those like little attacks here and there with denying primary and secondary, that sort of thing. I think it's, you're trying to really almost hit really hard at one time where you can create, you're not looking at creating like a 5 or 10 point delta. You're like, hey, I could really maybe push and get like a 20 point delta in one turn in this game. And, I think it just comes full circle where, hey, is it not a bad thing for the game? Maybe it's just a different thing for the game. Maybe that's the right lens to look at these Challenger cards in. But overall, if you stuck around this long, seriously appreciate you watching. Let me know your thoughts below, and we will catch you in the next one.